I don't know if that's appropriate. Are y'all ready to turn it up? So it's always hard to have the panel right after lunch. The food is settled, the blood is moving slow. Y'all are checking emails. But if I can have your attention, because this panel is actually integrated and there's some nuance around all the other panels that we talked about, K through 12, higher ed, and all of the panels that were shared this morning. And so before I get started with our panelists, I do want to make some acknowledgments. I want to thank Kendrick and Cherie for their leadership. Can we put our hands together for them? Kendrick and I were in the same class together. Cherie and I went to undergrad at Sam Houston State together. I see Rachel, one of my classmates in the room, a host of others. Rita was here earlier. She was our class chair, one of our chairs. But the husband's here. That's right. But the husband's here. She's a fierce advocate for military spouses, and she's leading our effort this city on Fleet Week. So follow that. I know there's a host of others. Dr. Marcy Strahan here. She pledged me. So my big sister's in the room. Good to see you. So let's get started. So immigration, and if you opened up your Twitter, your Facebook, you saw this morning what was happening at both of our international airports. Immigration has arrested the national conversation. We saw this in 2024 at the presidential election, and we all know in this room what happens nationally has implications locally. We're not separate of that. And so I'm so happy that we have powerhouses within our network to talk about this. I want to start with I'm going to open this up to all, but I want our former council member, Borden Kwan, to lead with this question. So with Houston being one of the most diverse cities, and let me just say that I represent District F, that was mentioned on the west side, the best side of Houston. And the reason why I say that is because we are the most racially and economically diverse districts. I have the nation's largest West African population outside of the continent on the west side. Vietnamese Americans, Chinese Americans, South Indian, Asian, you name it, we got it. So what happens nationally definitely impacts what is going on in our local community on the west side. If y'all ever want to get to Chinatown, I got some places to show you. I got some friends. So Councilmember Kwan, with Houston being one of the most diverse cities in the U.S., with a large immigrant population shaping our workforce, shaping our neighborhoods and our economy, from your perspective and your legal work, how does immigration law uniquely impact Houston compared to others?
Well, I would, okay, it's on.
Hit the left button. Switch, hit.
Obviously, immigration affects all the neighborhoods, but I think Houston is unique in that I feel like we have a cultural infrastructure in the city unlike a number of other cities. We are a friendly city, but as over the last 50 years, I've seen small communities grow larger and larger because they have a base here. They have churches, they have food restaurants, they have stores that they can relate to, and a network of people to help to incorporate themselves into this community. Over the years, I've been asked by different states like Arkansas and Mississippi, like, we see all these Asians coming here with money. How do we get them here to our state? Well, they don't want to come because they don't have other people like that. They don't have a community that is welcome to. You see it in Tennessee. They just recently, the congressman said, we don't want any more Muslims in this state. We are welcoming. And I think this is a key thing. And let me say one more thing. Our administration, leadership comes from the top. I go back a long ways. I remember working with Kathy Whitmire and all the other mayors since that time. And we've always believed that diversity is a positive, that people coming from different countries help our city. Yeah. And that's, I think, made a big difference. We became a model for other cities. I was active in National League of Cities. Yeah. And they were to learn, how did Houston do this? How did Houston whelp and grow because of that? So I think that, I think you need to give yourselves a round of applause because you are welcoming people. You look at people not from who their mom and dad was or their titles, but who they are as individuals or what they can add to the community.
No, absolutely. Yeah. Do I need a mic? So Judge and Daniel, I want you to respond to that as well from your unique perspective in terms of the context of the diversity in the city of Houston.
Thank you for having me. First of all, everyone's seen you out here. This pleasure, everyone. As far as the criminal perspective, criminal justice perspective, I would say right now the biggest thing is unpredictability. We are truly a melting pot. I was telling Sergio earlier that used to be my goal with my family to try different cultural cuisine every month. I went to a Persian restaurant last month. It's amazing how we represent every country. Um, but as far as I'll get right into immigration. We have a large police presence in Houston. We are a friendly place from my perspective. We are seeing more arrests, more facial recognition uh, technologies that are being used. DPS is more involved now with seeking out individuals that are undocumented. So I'll try not to be the Debbie Downer, but from the jurisdiction that I'm in, I am seeing some changes.
You judge. I'm an employment attorney and I help companies comply with immigration compliance laws. That means we need to make sure that employers are employing individuals who are authorized to work. But in my space in relation to what I'm seeing is that the reality with Houston is we have, I think, the estimation of 600,000 immigrants in our city. And there's a large majority of those that are undocumented to work. It's just a reality of life. Nationwide, we have about 11 million people in this country that are working undocumented. And I think people want to look the other way sometimes, but that's a reality. And so I think the big question employers are always asking, employers are asking is, how do I comply with the law? And so there's a strict balance back and forth, and we'll kind of get into it. But I think from my lens, it's, Houston is very diverse, as important said. There's a large workforce. Several sectors in our city have undocumented workers. And what are employers supposed to do now under this administration? So those are like questions we'll talk about. But I think initially those are topics that are on my mind.
And I'm glad, and I want to stay with you for this question. So I serve on the National League of Cities America's Housing Comeback, and I'm on the subcommittee of workforce. So when we talk about housing, infrastructure, the demand is in America, we need up to 5 million units to address our crisis. And what was absent in that conversation was workforce. What was really absent was immigration. The fact that that is a component when we're looking at our construction industry, when we look at the city of Houston and Harris County. So in context of your work around making sure that companies are compliant while also addressing the immigration, that economy that really drives a lot of what we're doing. And I will say as a council member, earlier this year or last year, I had several public work projects delayed. Right. Because folks were afraid to show up and do the work. So, how do you marry those two pieces with your work?
It's been interesting with this administration. So this law about employing people that are authorized to work have been in existence since 1986 with President Reagan. That's not new. What we've seen with going back, I think, historically with George W. Bush, our president, was when we first started seeing raids, the surprise raids where a helicopter would show up and a splash kind of thing for his teams. We saw that slim down with President Obama, restart with Biden. So it's been up and down. But what we've seen really, I think, is, for a lack of a better way of saying it, is the wild, wild west. Yeah. In the past year, under this administration, we saw stepping outside of Houston, talking about Minneapolis. I mean, that was, I have a footprint representing clients in ICE immigration cases. And I have a presence now in Minnesota because of what happened there about 60 days ago. And basically, they were just walking down streets, whether it be Westheimer, imagine this, walking down Westheimer, showing up to construction sites, basically asking people if you're documented. If you were brown skin, more likely to be asked if you're documented or authorized to work in the United States. Showing up to Targets, ordering Starbucks, eating food there, harassing customers and employees. That's the reality we live in now. So in relation to the construction industry, which we know Houston is booming, we talked about growing in the Loop at 610, Bellway 8, and everything else, they're struggling. I mean, candidly, folks are scared to show up to work. Yep. Employers want to hire. They're asking, who do we hire? So there's a strain in relation to the workers, where the work full of people that want to work. And it goes back to the reality. We have a broken immigration system. We talk about it a lot. Every administration says we want to fix it. I could tell you in the back of our Michelin-rated restaurants here in town, homes are being built on your street, hospitality of hotels. There's undocumented workers. Right. And I support them. My mom was someone who crossed over the border illegally, was deported because a neighbor called workful on her. So I'm a product of that. But it's a reality we have to kind of recognize and accept in the debate in relation to this nation and this city and greater Houston area relies highly on undocumented workers, but we have to advocate for a system that can help them become legal as some past. As we know, um, these cooks are not the criminals and the rapists that I think our administration is kind of advocated. They are people that support us. They go to church with us, right? They take care of our kids, landscaping. And I'm not diminishing the work there. And there's more professionals at a heightened level. We had an intern a few years ago who was an A-plus student at Oster College and transported to Rice University. His dream was to become an attorney, but he didn't have a social security number. So he lived in a void where he could never fulfill a dream. So his dream of becoming an attorney was going back from Mexico and going to law school there and practicing law there. So I'm saying a lot, but I'm just saying the reality about the construction space is it's a problem, but it's a problem everywhere. It's just not just us.
No, for sure. And Judge, I want to pivot to you. So we can't read a news article or watch a segment without a lot of emphasis around Harris County courts, right? Who are the judges? What are they doing? What are the cases? And so since there's a lot of attention given to Harris County courts, in the past it wasn't, it was just kind of like judges served and we didn't really know who they were. We didn't know their caseload. We almost didn't know them by name. A lot of people still don't know when they go to vote. They don't know judges by name. So from the perspective of the criminal court system, how do immigration issues intersect with cases that come through Harris County?
Well, first of all, that's a big question to answer. The most basic thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is every individual in the United States enjoys the same rights, whether they're a lawful permanent resident or whether they're an undocumented immigrant. Same charges, same penalties, it's same defenses. The big issue is, to me, I see a lot of it with defenses or low-risk offenses. If you are accused of a crime, especially if you're an undocumented immigrant, ICE will place a hold on you. You will remain in custody unless and until you go before an immigration court and that's resolved. The big difference is what I see as a judge is that person may be arrested, placed in custody, post a bond, and then the hold will be placed. They lose their money on the bond, and then they remain in custody again until the criminal case is resolved. If, as a judge, if I'm evaluating the risks, appearance report, things of that sort, and I consider it to be a defensible case, low risk, if I were to break that person a bond, even a personal bond, they would not be released from jail. So they are not able to investigate their case, handle any defenses, hire their own lawyer as well because they lose their job, lose their house and everything else. And one of the other differences I'm saying is even some charges with lawful permanent residents, I'll also see holds placed on them as well. I mean, some notes here because there's a lot. That thing that I'm saying is even if in undocumented immigrant cases, it used to be they could get an immigration bond. They could get it usually on pretty much any type of case. They would put evidence on immigration court to give them a bond. Now there's no bonds. All persons remain in custody until they go before an immigration court. And that's the voice of this circuit. So that's kind of one of the big things that's happening. And you're saying with probation, if you're a local permanent resident, you think you're getting some great deal on some case, the moment that you're placed on probation, even if it's a non-conviction probation, like a deferred adjudication, they immediately notify ICE. You're probably immediately violating the probation. ICE gets notified and you're placed in custody, and you have no bond to get out and try to rectify that situation. So in a sense, you're guilty until you prove your innocence. So that's the big.
And Judge, you raised really, really strong points. don't believe many of us in this room were aware of that. And so I want to go to Daniel and council member. Education is important. So many immigrants arrive with limited knowledge, and I would just offer that now in this climate, this knowledge is important for U.S. residents to be aware of, right? As we advocate on behalf of our neighbors and communities, what are the biggest misconceptions people have about immigration law in the United States?
Councilmember, I think you're right. As far as lack of knowledge is terrible. Most people think it's only about marrying a U.S. citizen or filing for asylum. Yeah. We have three major areas of aid. So relative petitions is true, humanitarian concerns, but also labor. And then you said, okay, well, Danny just talked about the fact that we have a shortage of labor, right? So can't you look at that? And I think people overlook that so often that we can go through a labor certification, prove that they're not displacing U.S. workers. Right now, I have done a number of people working as sandwich artists at Subway because nobody wants to do that job. Right? Nobody wants to do construction work in the hospital. Nobody wants to do yard maintenance or take care of senior citizens. But people don't know these are the occupations that could be sponsored. You don't have to have a degree or be a nuclear scientist. Yeah, we want those people too, sure. But understanding what options people have is so important. But the underlying problem really is that we have not had reform in over 30 years. Spain has had 5 different immigration laws in the past 30 years. We had yet to really address our needs and concerns. And it's going to hurt our economy because we need these jobs. We have an aging population. And he's been also working with the ABIC, American Business Immigration Coalition. 1,500 businesses of all types, dairy farmers, construction workers, hotels, trying to get some reform. We're going to be in Washington next month lobbying. But it's such a political hot potato. Yeah. And one last thing. Under the Biden administration, we had temporary protected status for about 500,000 people. When Trump came in, he canceled those. Those people who were legal one day, next week, and illegal the next day. Just a swipe of a pen. And people who wanted to hire legal people could no longer hire legal people. So, I'm sorry, I don't have a solution, but we need reform.
No, absolutely. Daniel, what about you?
I echo what Board just talked about. The stereotype that people, when we have conversations and debates about the immigration system, people assume what Gordon says, well, why don't they just come in legally? Or why don't they just apply for a visa? And the reality is, yeah, there's a percent of individuals that can fit that mold. But what we're avoiding and ignoring and not fixing is the 11 million undocumented workers that are working. Now, that's the estimation that Pew Research has. We have to think about there's more individuals that are here that are undocumented, their families and kids, right? So we have a large pool of folks that we're just ignoring, and they should try to resolve that problem. So everything Gordon said is accurate. I think that's the reality, and I'm hoping we'll get some resolution. But it's been more than 30 years since 1986 is when that bust happened. So it's been too long. So I think keep this on your radar. Advocate with your political liaisons, your congressmen, your senators, because it's an issue that we have to put at the forefront because it's a reality we have to fix.
No, absolutely. And then just as an aside, if you want to engage on behalf, there's a HUD rule that is currently posted for public comment that rescinds the eligibility for mixed status households. So if you live in a mixed status household, you're no longer eligible for housing subsidy, right? So when we look at homelessness, when we look at displacing families, when we look at children not showing up to school, all of this is interconnecting. You can participate by adding your public comment on how disruptive that will be to our region. We were just talking about HISD and school loss during COVID. A-Leave lost school students as well. If they were primarily 5 years old and under, right? Our pre-K. So if you want to advocate, yes, every level of government, but you could do something and actually lend your name and your voice to a federal rule that's receiving public comment, so we can halt that, because that will be extremely disruptive as well.
Yeah, back at that. SBA loans now, if you're a permanent resident, you no longer qualify. Also, if you're a partner in business with the citizen, you got to give up that partnership.
Correct. And SBA loans are critical when we think about disaster recovery. In this region, having 9 federally declared disasters, they had 0% interest, right? So it's really disruptive when we celebrate our diversity in food. You can come on the West Side and, have the best African and, Vietnamese, Chinese food, but it's not just celebrating through food. It's literally the economy. There's a whole economic engine that moves the city through. And so these federal rules are in place. They're open for public comment. I want to encourage you to contribute to that. Judge, I want to pivot to you. So when immigration statuses intersect with criminal law, the consequences can be life altering. You alluded to that earlier. How should attorneys and judges approach these cases with fairness and clarity?
Well, first of all, you've got competing jurisdictions. All right, I'm the state district judge. I'm competing with feds. Yep. And just so you know, there's no competition. Yep. Yes. Even when I've got competing charges, and I'll look and like, oh, I got this. I'm to bench warrant them over from the feds. Now that ain't happening. The feds do not let them go. Do not bring them over to handle their state charges. And the same parallels with immigration. I don't have any choices with immigration. Even if I've got a person in front of me, the best I could do, especially they're individuals. All right, I don't look at them as undocumented, and no one should, right? You look at them as a young person, as a person with maybe disabilities, or whatever the situation is. But I know myself and a lot of the other judges, we're all about resources and information and community building, because Harris County is a gigantic place. Yep. And we don't have public transportation in any of the outlying cities. So I can't really necessarily answer your question other than I make sure that I let them know their legal consequences, both when they're charged and when they plead, that it could result in denial of naturalization, exclusion from the country, blah, blah, blah. But when they're arrested, not only am I required to inform them of their legal rights, but also if you are not a United States citizen, I make them aware that I will notify their consulate. I could tell you 10 times out of 10, they don't ever go that route, because in their mind, we're just notifying the authorities. SCR have been charged. That's well.
And I'm glad that you raised that point. I have the Mexican consulate in my district, Costa Rica, Philippines, Indonesia, Angola borders, and you're absolutely right, which leads to my next question, which is open. So, the average American has resistance at times engaging with the legal system, right? Even just navigating our own life, there's barriers to that. Add on immigration, add on language, add on cultural nuance. So in your experiences, or maybe even some advice for families navigating the immigration process, often for years, what are some of the emotional and practical challenges they experience, and how can attorneys better support them?
So if I can add, I'll share the judge's discussion there, because I don't think it's the judiciary. She has to do her job. That's how she gets show. Finding, and I'm not advertising, finding an attorney who knows what they're doing in immigration law. I mean, it's a tough specialty. And immigration, criminal law and immigration, the overlap is extra tough. Yeah. So, we're fortunate, I think, here in Harris County and in Fort Bend County to have some enlightened district attorneys, to tell you the truth, who will work with the lawyers and maybe go for a plea that would not necessarily have an immigration consequence. But knowing how to craft that plea is very important. Also, quick trial diversion, so that there's no indictment issued in the case. Because, as the judge alluded to, a normal citizen, you say, okay, I'll give you probation. After a year, we'll knock it off your record or defer adjudication, and the judge will say, you're not guilty. That's a guilty plea in immigration court. You are found guilty because you admitted the elements of the crime, even though even though state law does not have those people anymore. I remember talking to one of the members of Congress where they've been a judge before said, "What? I thought I was being nice to the people." I said, "Judge, you were condemning them just as if you had found them guilty of the offense itself." So again, finding lawyers who know what they're doing, who can work with the criminal defense lawyer to get a plea, who know the DAs, that can craft something so that by the time it gets to the judge may not see the case actually. Sure. It's kind of like
And I'm glad that you raised that point. And you know the saying, I think Rahm Emanuel said this: never let a good crisis go to waste, right? And I think when we during this time that we're in a crisis, and many immigrant families can find themselves scammed, can find themselves abused because they're so vulnerable and there's such a high demand on immigration attorneys. And so, what with that cultural nuance and the delicate nature of this conversation, like what do these families need to know? What are the good, how do they define a good attorney, right? How do they do this? If they have a 10-year-old who's the only one who speaks English in the home, how do they decipher that in terms of navigate the legal system? So I want you to, opine on that in terms of the barriers that could possibly be in place for them to secure good representation.
So I'll start from my perspective. Historically, undocumented, even some lawful permanent residences, they're from disenfranchised communities. They don't have a lot of funds. The first thing you want to do as a judge, very first stage, make sure you appoint them a lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a lawyer that speaks Spanish. And the big issue for any of you lawyers out there is that we don't have enough qualified lawyers to speak Spanish, because that is what we need most here. Anyone that's undocumented from any country, by law, must have a certified translator provided by the court. But I don't send that translator out to talk to witnesses, to do other things. What I do is I set aside money, since the lawyer's appointed, right? I set aside money for consulting an immigration lawyer, one of these two experts. And then I also immediately appoint an investigator, so they don't feel like immigration is their only concern. They need to focus also on the criminal case. If they get that done, there's a stronger likelihood that they'll have better chances in the immigration court. But that's the part that really has frustrated me, is that even in Spanish, you don't have enough qualified lawyers to handle that on the Spanish side. But that's very important in making sure that they do know they still have those rights.
I would admit it's a difficult question, right? It's like shopping and doing your Google research in relation to picking a service provider that you want to hire for your family, which is very core. And then you're touching not just your family, but the immigration issue that can affect your ability to stay in this country or not. So, generally what I do is I do recommend nonprofits, and they do here, I think nonprofits, the churches and other organizations do a good job. The problem there is they're just they don't have the capacity up anymore. And so, but they do provide referral services. I would say whether you speak Spanish or whatever language, try to identify maybe an attorney that does speak your language to make the communication easier. You're asking tough questions, and I do see we have an interpreter at the office who may not be certified, may not be translating exactly what's necessary, and that you could lose some issues in translation there. So it's just, there's multiple layers, but I think it's difficult. I think provide a helping hand to anybody that that needs an immigration attorney, to help them vet the process and identify. And you do have to be aware of the scammers out there. Unfortunately, there are scammers taking advantage of people knowing they are vulnerable and acquire high retainers. And well, I unfortunately, you had this conversation last week with one of my immigration law partners is, there are arbitraries that charge thousands of dollars. You may not ever see the attorney, you'll see their paralegal. Right. And I mean, those are questions you need to ask in relation to what's the value of you're getting, providing a helping hand to folks that are in need. You just, providing some guidance as much as possible.
Let me just ask, the TMO, Metropolitan Organization, some of you may know them. They're a coalition of churches and nonprofits, and trying to work with them, because a lot of people go to their minister and say, hey, what do I do? Somebody at their church. And so trying to really, some of you may know Lynn Bangs, that being in the UA's law school. He's reached out to me trying to get the immigration clinic, South Texas clinic, TSU clinic. We all have immigration clinics to try to work collaboratively with the bar. We have a coalition of immigration lawyers also that bring it together to be able to help the public because people are so vulnerable. I very much don't use, can't solve everybody's not.
Absolutely. We have 5 minutes, but we do have Kendrick on the floor for some questions.
Thank you all. Look here, Ellen Van too. I appreciate your response. I definitely agree with proposed meeting, but I also feel there's so many who do a bad job, but not is working on the idea solution. But what about the alternatives? So my question is, if our idea solution uh
You mind coming just a little bit closer?
specifically related to safe construction, if we don't have more, what can we or what are we doing to educate other Eastonians?
So essentially, he said, for those who didn't hear his question, and Derek, can you share your title so they understand the context of your question?
I am the vice president construction contractor diversity fair, so I basically told to get minority women-owned businesses onto construction.
Procurement, right? Right, in a nutshell, procurement. And so if the solutions that we ideally would like to see, if they don't come, right? How do we save ourselves? Essentially, how do we pivot to make sure that we can respond to the market demands? Because we all have a demand for our city and our region to move forward. Any consideration to that?
You know, you as a politician,
I'm a public servant.
a public servant, I've gone to the labor unions and I talked to them and we asked, how many of your kids want to go into joining the union and do construction work? Nobody does. I mean, we as a society have not valued those services.
Where?
I know now maybe there are salaries and there are opportunities, but we raised our kids to go to college and we get ahead white collar jobs, not blue collar jobs. So I don't know how you change mindsets.
And let me just add, I think the conversation with the higher ed piece is really important, and what we're seeing through K through 12. When I served on the A-Leaf school board over a decade ago, I was 15 years old. We approved a bond, a $315 million bond to create a CTE center, and we literally toured. We hired a consultant, or we toured car facilities. Toyota shared with us that they had 2 facilities that they would build today if they had the talent to hire. So you can walk into the CTE and it's outfitted like Sterling McCall, right? You can walk into the veterinary. We looked at the careers where the demand is. And so I think many of our K through 12 schools and school districts, that's what they're competing with, is that it's not the industry of my grandfather, right? You're talking technology there, pay is there. I got all these degrees and all of that. And the man who is my plumber, my mechanic, ain't got nothing what I got, and I got to pay him lots of money. Okay. So right. And so I think we're in the pivot of that where we are creating our own pipeline. And from a city's perspective, we're always saying the city is open for business. We want the Chevron to come. We want these global companies to come. But in turn, what they're asking us is, do you have a workforce to sustain what we're bringing, right? For the entire continuum. So I think you're seeing a semblance of that happening. And I think that type of question should continue to be at the forefront because there's such a demand on our region to grow and to anticipate growth. We're going to need able bodies to do this, and it's definitely a lucrative career.
I just wanted to add to that conversation. I currently work for the Gulf Coast Workforce Board, and there are an opportunity to engage and support as corporations, as public servants, and we partner with community organizations for apprenticeships. There are paid apprenticeships, but that they need support, and there is pay that for education and then transition for those that are learning the trade to move directly into the workforce. But that takes a lot of collaboration across organizations that want those employees to be ready, prepared, and available. The unions are blue, right? Work in developing these apprenticeships and partnerships, but we have to fully engage them, and just as we engage in other traditional education as well.
Sure. And I'm gonna let our panelists. I'm not a panelist, but let me say this: Tuesday we had a housing committee meeting, and the point was raised about our Second Chance program, that there are about 15,000 inmates released from TDCJ into the city of Houston, and they disperse out. So we have to address a housing piece, but that's also a second chance opportunity to engage them into the workforce with new technologies, right? So and then we're looking at many of our boomers are retiring, but still can participate in the workforce. It's an opportunity to upskill them as well with the technology. And they have the traditional training around being a plumber, construction, all the trades, but we now can elevate their work and they create a longer pipeline. So I think we do have opportunity, and it's about the collaboration. And I think for many of our governmental entities, if we can get out of our own way and see that it's about this complete region, we'll actually have some legs around that.
Let me just mention that it was another time when I was on city council. We had day labor sites that we've worked with the community because people wanted to work in construction. If they didn't get selected that day, we would teach you English and other skills. So, as I'm telling labor force, it's just sad we can't merge the two together. Yeah.
Ooh, and Jay Dix, deputy with the sheriff's office, worked out protection of several years. Is there some nonprofits? You mentioned a few churches, but Restore Justice, all these different nonprofits for those that are incarcerated. Yeah, specifically for immigration. Are there some community partners that we can reach out to help? I know you guys do a lot of advocacy, but who we could partner with, to help those that are incarcerated. Since a lot of times they're not able to find somebody that can translate for them or whatever. But there's some for-profit nonprofits out there, maybe.
Well, Houston Immigration Coalition would be one that I would think of for you. Also, the VA's office is now trying to develop more expertise in immigration law so that when it comes to how to get craft a plea or to work an agreement, they at least know what not to and agree to. So I don't think there's a formal other than the Eastern Immigration Policy. Right now, I think Annie mentioned nonprofits, Catholic charities, the YMCA, all of them have had their budgets slashed by our liberal government, talking with the dean at DOH, they have been prohibited under state law to represent undocumented people. They have been prohibited to help people with asylum cases. They don't know what to do.
Yeah. And also I think it's important that we just keep in the front of our mind the chilling effect is that in an immigrant community, many people are now choosing to go back into the shadow. I have families in Alief ISD that they've chosen to self-deport because of mixed status, and a parent has left, so they've had to transition out. And so if help was available, there's resistance to self-identify for various reasons. And so the Alief Y shut down, federal cuts. I had the YNCA International in the district, cut and shut down. Where the work was happening to build that infrastructure, they've been put on hold. And so we have to be beyond creative to address that community. And we're going to need all of our heads in the room to think about how we can do that to support this community around workforce, around reentry, what have you, and supporting their families as well.
So I just wanted to piggyback off that. There are individuals that can remain on probation if they're a permanent resident or if they're on PGI, which is what you just spoke about. Probation, and I'm head this committee that is over probation and pretrial services, which for me and a lot of other judges, it's so important about empowerment because the genesis of a lot of crimes come from substance use, come from fear of law enforcement because they don't have the basic resources. Immigration, where cases are continually having to either be dismissed because people don't want to participate or they don't know about some of the resources. So with probation, if someone pleads and they're either, again, pretrial diversion or probation, they have partnered with many employers who will give them an opportunity with jobs while they're on probation or PTI. They also have a lot of contracts or agreements with colleges, and then also hoping to educate them on a pathway to citizenship or ensuring that their lawful status here can remain. Because that's one of the big things. One more thing about U visas. That's a big opportunity for people that are victims of crime.
Yeah.
Because usually when law enforcement, they're investigating a scene, people scatter. They don't want to participate.
For sure.
But if the victim of a crime knows that they have that legal status they can apply for, certainly helps them in the justice process.
We've been notified. We have 1 minute, and 1 minute, and then one more question. All right, my friend. Last question.
Hey, Josh Wallenty, thanks for what you do. I'm all your Zoom. What sort of saying embracing. Josh, my understanding is you don't have the right to public to free representation and immigration courts, only criminal procedures. So,
The civil area, yeah.
so if it's a civil area, are you guys partnering with public defenders to let them know, hey, don't do this, or you're gonna critically undermine this person's ability to remain in the country? How have we partnering?
So I like to that. So the public defender's office, they created and carved out a really wonderful immigration service. And they do a lot of holistic services that are not available. Let's say if it's an appointed lawyer. So even if it's not a PD that's representing someone, they'll make sure that they steer them toward that area because you're right, they don't have that representation. And so many of these individuals have multiple jurisdictional problems. You're in family court, criminal, immigration, so that those services help them kind of as an umbrella.
No comment.
I think that's
That's out of my space.
I think that's it. I want to shout out Alan Steinberg. I nominated him to Leadership Houston, so I take credit for all of the good things. If he messes up, blame Kendrick. Wonderful.
Your round of applause for our pal. Worldwide questions.